Good evening. For some of you, good afternoon, good morning. This is Bart van Zevenand with RightCrowd. I'm responsible for our presence control and cybersecurity solutions, and I would like to welcome you to this RightCrowd webinar, in which we're going to do two things. First of all, give you an update on our social distancing and contact tracing solution, a solution which we launched in April of this year, but which has evolved quite a bit over the last couple of months. So we wanted to share with you the latest and greatest of what we have. And then secondly, in this webinar, we will also go through a couple of lessons learned. We've been implementing this solution at many organizations around the globe, and we wanted to share with you a couple of the lessons we've learned in deploying contact tracing and social distancing solutions in a large organization. So before we go into the update itself, I want to start with a short recap of the solution, just to make sure that everyone sort of well understands the solution. And then we'll go into a couple of the recent updates in terms of the reporting. So starting with a quick sort of overview of the goals that we're trying to achieve with our RightCrowd social distancing and contact tracing solution. The very first thing that we want to achieve when we implement this solution in a large organization is get that continuous reminding awareness creation around social distancing. Keeping a physical distance from someone else is something that is new to all of us. And when you have organizations where people start to return to the office, you see that it is very hard to make that change. People are used to working together in a relatively sort of close way, have been doing that for years, and now suddenly they have to keep that like 6 feet or 2 meter distance from each other. It is a big change. So the first thing that we want to do with the solution is, by means of that continuous visual warning, make sure that people keep that safe distance. So that's number one. Number two is that with this solution, we want to give you insight. We want to give you the data. How well or how bad is social distancing being respected within your organization? And we want to provide you that view across the entire workforce. So with the information, and you will see that in the new reporting dashboard that I will demonstrate in a couple of minutes from now, you will see that you literally have all of that data at your fingertips. You will be able to see how many events did we see where people came too close to each other. When do they occur? Where do they occur? How is that evolving over time? Is the organization getting better at this or not? So all of that data available in the reporting. And then the third objective of the solution, and that is for most organizations, the primary objective, it is all about contact tracing. And contact tracing is super important. In the context of an organization, of a business, it can mean the difference between having to shut down an entire office or an entire factory versus, when implementing the solution, being able to just have a selection, people that you know have been close to someone that got infected by COVID-19, being able to just ask those people to quarantine, work from home for a couple of days until they are safe and can come back to your office or your factory. So that's really the three main goals that we're trying to achieve with our solution. If we then go into the how it works, so very simple, and I'll describe it from an end user perspective. I'm an end user working for a large organization. I go to my office or my factory, and as a user, the only thing that is expected from me is either taking my own badge holder that I received or picking up a badge holder that I take every single day from the reception. Both models are possible, but I have my badge holder. I take my access badge, the card that I use to get into the building, and I simply slip it inside of the badge holder. That's all that is needed from the end user. At the point that the person inserts his or her badge into the holder, as they are entering the building, the badge holder will automatically activate. Behind the scenes, the user doesn't need to know about that. Behind the scenes, we have a so-called gateway device that is installed in that entrance area that is doing the work. So it's the gateway device that makes sure that the badge holder gets activated for social distancing and contact tracing. For the user, what happens is that as soon as they've inserted their badge into the holder, the LED of the badge holder starts showing a green light. And depending on the setting that you've set in our dashboard, that can be a fixed green light or a green glowing light in and out. And that's just that reassurance for the user, like everything's fine, the solution is working as expected. As of that moment, each of those badge holders is going to continuously monitor all of the others that come close by. So it sees all of the badge holders around, and if at some point one or more badge holders come too close to yourself, the first thing we will do is give both people, in this example, if you look at the slide, we have two individuals, both people a warning that they're coming too close to each other. That warning is given by means of that LED light. So normally, as I explained, it's showing a green glowing or a green fixed light. And when you come too close, within approximately that 6 feet or 2 meter distance, at that point, the sort of light will switch from green to a yellow blinking light. So that's that visual reminder like, hey, be careful, you're coming too close. If those people reestablish a safe distance, they take a step back, then nothing happens. The light will go back to green, nothing has happened. But if, in this example, those two users would stay too close beyond the warning period, and by default, the warning period of our solution is 5 seconds, but it is a software parameter that you can decrease or increase to a different value. So if they stay too close beyond that warning period, then at that point, two things will happen. First of all, the LED that initially switched from green to yellow blinking is now going to go to red blinking, more of an alarm type state. And at that point, and only at that point, we then record what we call a close contact event. What is a close contact event? It's very simple. It's going to record the unique identifier from the other badge holder that came too close. It's going to record the timestamp, so the exact time when that close contact started, and it will store the duration. How long were those two individuals into close contact with each other? That information is stored inside of the badge holder. And those people can have multiple close contact events throughout the day. All of them will be stored and kept inside of the badge holder. The device can store up to 500 of those. Now, as soon as this person that has like a badge holder with close contact events stored on it would walk back in what we call in range of one of our gateways. I briefly spoke about a first function of that gateway. When people enter the building, the gateway would take care of the activation of the device. Second function of that same gateway is then to pick up close contact events from the holders and send them to the backend platform in the cloud. So that happens as soon as they come back in what we call in range of those gateways, and these gateways have a range of about 200 feet, like 60, 70 meters in terms of a radius around it. So that happens throughout the day. At the end of the day, when people go back home, we expect one simple action from them, either to take their badge out of the holder or to simply slip the card up by 1/2 inch or 1 centimeter. And at that point, the badge holder will stop doing its social distancing monitoring and contact tracing. So that was a quick overview of the solution. If we look at a couple of the components before we go into the latest and greatest reporting, we've spoken about that badge holder. So you see a picture of the badge holder here. It has that LED that will help to continuously remind people, but then also show the alerting and the alarm state. That badge holder is a device that, of course, needs to be charged once in a while. Each badge holder lasts for about 1 to 2 working weeks. Recharging is very simple. Either you use a standard micro USB cable, which you plug in to recharge. Recharging takes about 4 hours when the device is almost completely empty, or you can use one of our charging stations to do so. When a device is running low on battery, the user is going to be warned about that. There's 3 different mechanisms by which we inform the user about that. First of all, when you insert the card, when you arrive in the morning at the office, when you insert the card, the first 3 blinks that are shown by the LED is showing the battery status. If those 3 blinks are green, you're still good. If the first 3 blinks are yellow, you know that you're in between 10 and 20% battery left. And if the first 3 blinks are red, you know that it's time to recharge the device. Throughout the day, if your normal green glowing light suddenly becomes a green blinking light, that is also another warning for the user to say, be careful, it's time to start recharging your device. This same badge holder is also able to read out cards that are inserted into the holder if those cards are so-called smart cards. And I'll get back to that a little bit later in the session. Then we have the gateway devices. As I briefly explained, they have two main tasks. They activate the devices when people enter the building or the factory in the morning, and then the second function is to collect the close contact events as badge holders start collecting those throughout the day. We have the RightCrowd app, which is optional, but is pretty handy. It adds, on top of the visual warning that the badge holder gives, it gives an audible alert and also allows you to look at your own close contact events if you want to. And then last but not least, we have the reporting dashboard, which we're going to dive into right now. And that dashboard is literally your interface, your look into what is happening from a social distancing and a contact tracing perspective. So what we're going to do now is switch to that dashboard. Some of you may have seen our reporting dashboards when you joined one of our webinars a couple of weeks or months ago. What you're looking at right now is the latest version of the dashboard that has been live for a little more than 2 weeks now. And what we're going to do is quickly walk through the functionality so you get a feel for the type of data that is available as part of the solution. So in our dashboard, there's a whole range of settings and things that you can look at, but what we'll focus on is the social distancing and contact tracing related information of the dashboard. The first thing that you will do when you go into this section of the dashboard is set the 3 filters on top of the reporting here. The 3 filters are, first of all, the time period. What is the data period, the period of time that you want to look at? The second filter you have is the duration of the close contacts. Do you want to see all of the close contacts or only close contacts that took a certain minimum amount of time? And then a third filter is a location filter. I'm briefly going to walk through each of those. So the first filter is the time period. You can choose from a couple of predefined ones. I want to look at the data from today, last week, last 2 weeks, last month, last 2 months. Let's select the last month here. If you would want to go for a more precise time period, you can also use this widget here to pick 2 specific, like a start and an end date, and an exact start hour and ending hour. The second filter is looking at close contacts that had a certain minimum duration. So if I turn on this toggle, I can now say I'm interested in all close contact events. That's the default. But I can also say, like, no, I want to filter out all of the short ones. I'm not interested in those. So I can, as an example, say, show me just a close contact that took 1 minute. And you'll see that the amount already goes down quite significantly. You could choose a different value. One of them that we included is the definition that the WHO organization has set as like a global standard for close contacts. And that is a close contact, 2 people being too close together for more than 15 minutes. So if I would apply that, you'll see that it goes down to just 23 events across that reporting period. And then the third filter is location. What we do, and I want to be very precise about that, our solution is not a geo-tracking solution. These badge holders are not going to know exactly where people walk throughout the building. That is not the goal. And that, by the way, would also come with a ton of privacy and GDPR issues that we don't want to get into. So what we focus on from a location perspective is know by building, and in some cases by floor, where close contact events happened. So in another section in the dashboard, in the location section, you can define a hierarchy of your location. So you can say, these are the different countries in which I have offices or factories. Then within those countries, I pick a certain state or city. And underneath that, I have buildings. And then if you want to, you can even go down to a floor level. In that location tree, you basically assign each of the gateways that we spoke about. You attach them to the lowest branch in that tree. And based on that, we can then do the filtering of the close contact events in this reporting interface as we're looking at. So that's the 3 filters that I spoke about. What I'm going to do for the demonstration is go back to showing, for example, all of the events that took at least 1 minute so that we have a nice data set in this case, 144 close contact events over the last month. What I should tell you is that the data we're looking at is not just dummy data. This is actually the close contacts that we're tracking within RightCrowd. So at RightCrowd, we use our badge holders within all of our offices across the globe, in our HQ building in Australia, but also in the other offices in Europe and in the United States of America. So what we're looking at is across the last month, we had 144 close contacts that took at least 1 minute across all of our locations. What we can see is that those 144 close contacts were triggered or generated by 35 people out of the 59 that have been in the office in that period of time. At RightCrowd, just as an FYI, we're not like fully back up to speed in our offices. We have about 1/3 of the workforce that is going back to offices. So we can see that in that 1 month period, 35 of the 59 people that have been in the office generated at least one close contact. And we have an average and a total contact hour. And if we look below that, a couple of like highlights that we show, these were like the longest contacts that we noticed. So we have the longest contact in the last month was a close contact of 1 hour and 41 minutes, 37 seconds. This has been an employee, which you can see by the E, with a visitor. So probably two people sitting in a meeting room too close to each other for a long meeting. We can see that 59% of the people that were in the offices generated at least one close contact. And then we have these three sort of trend graphs that you can see over time. Total amount of close contacts, how does it evolve? Total contact duration, and then the total amount of people with close contacts. Those trends start to be very interesting once you start using this for a couple of months, because then you can start to see the organization hopefully getting better at respecting social distancing. The next thing we're going to do is then zoom in on the people with close contacts. So we see that there's 35 people with close contacts. So let's have a closer look. First of all, you see that in the first column, you're not actually seeing actual names. And that is what the vast majority of our clients do as well. Clients typically do not want to put actual first name, last names in our system for obvious reasons, GDPR, data privacy, and the like. So what most people will choose as sort of the data that they put in that first name column is employee IDs. So that's what we use at RightCrowd as well. You see different IDs, some with an E, some with a V, employees and visitors. And what we see is 35 people with close contacts. So we have this list of the 35 showing. We see the first 20 on this page, and then we could scroll on to the next page. What we see if we go through it line by line, let's take this fourth line here. We have an employee with this employee number. What we see is that in the reporting period that we selected from September 1st through October 1st, we see that the first close contact that this person generated in that period was on September 8th. It happened in Australia, in Robina, in the Robina North location. And we see that across that 1 month period that this employee generated close contacts for a total duration of 3 hours, 12 minutes, and 23 seconds. And what we can also see is that those close contacts happened with 4 individuals and were made up by 11 close contacts. Why is there a difference between the two? This person came too close to 4 people, John, Mary, doesn't matter, like 4 names, but with some of them, he may have been too close more than once. And if we want to look at that detail, we can open this up. And we look at those are the 4 people that we saw. So visitor 1 and then 3 other employees. And what we can see is that for each of them, we can see first time that they came too close, location, total time with that specific individual, and then the amount of times that they came too close to that person. So if we take the example of the last one, he came too close to that employee for a total of 12 minutes, 22 seconds. If we want to look at the details, this occurred 5 times. We can then look at when were those 5 times, and for each of them, how long did that close contact last. Any of this information can be downloaded. You have this little Excel button here. What this does, if you click on that, we generate 2 spreadsheets. One is a summary overview showing all of the people with close contacts and pretty much the information you see in this first line item here. And then the detail of the close contact is going to give you that layer down, basically saying for everyone that had close contact, what were the different people, or who were the different people that came into close contact with that person. That is something that our customers typically use to then resolve it to the actual names of people away from our system. So you download this, you have the employee identifiers as an example, and then away from our system, you resolve that to the actual names of those people. If at some point in time, one of your people sort of gets infected with the COVID-19 virus, at that point, you will want the contact tracing information. How do you do that? And it's entirely up to you. I'll just give you an example. We could say, I'm interested in case of an infection. I'm going to look at the last 2 weeks. I'm going to look at, for example, all of the close contacts. I don't care if it's just like, if it's more than 1 minute or 50 minutes. I want to know all of the close contacts, like everyone that person came into close contact with. And I'm going to look at all of my locations. So I've set my filters, all close contacts, no minimal duration, last 2 weeks, all locations. And then I'm going to use this filter to look for a very specific person, the person that got infected. Let's take an example. Visitor 1 informed us that he or she got infected by the virus. We want to know who was that visitor in touch with when they came to our organization. And here we go. We have all of the details. We see that the visitor met with 5 people at RightCrowd. These are the 5 people. We know when did he or she came into close contact with each of them, where did that happen, the duration, and how many times. So all of the information at your fingertips. And again, you can just hit this Excel button to then download that information so that HR can take the necessary measures. So that was a quick overview of the latest and greatest sort of reporting that comes with the solution. What I'm going to do now is go through a couple of lessons learned. We've implemented this with a number of organizations around the globe. So I want to go into a couple of the things that we've picked up as part of those deployments, and also things that we heard in terms of feedback from those clients. Just to give you some perspective, we have deployed this RightCrowd social distancing and contact tracing solution at a little over 50 organizations at this point. Those deployments vary in scale. Some of them are still in starter kit evaluation phase, literally sort of testing our solution. We have a fair amount of them that are in pilot mode. That typically happens with 20 to 100, although we also have pilots that are 300 devices. And then we have a whole range of customers that are really in production rollouts, where we're talking about hundreds and a couple of them thousands of devices being deployed across offices and factories around the globe. Those companies are active in a variety of industries. I listed the most important ones from our perspective. The majority is related to indoor manufacturing. So companies that manufacture goods internally, those organizations cannot afford operations to be shut down. So they do want a solution like this to be in place. Quite a few clients in financial services who are starting to bring people back to their offices. Pharmaceutical, mining, entertainment, those are the sort of most common ones, but there's other verticals as well. If we then look at what does a typical deployment look like? So if we look at the pilots, and pilots in our view are the best way to sort of validate the solution. You can also use our starter kits, which I will get back to at the end of the session. But pilots are, in my view, the most representative way of validating the value of the solution and testing the technology. Pilots, from a recommendation perspective, we say 50 to 100 people, that's sort of ideal. And super important, you should take a real live environment. And what do we mean by that? What you should not do is say like, hey, I'm going to ask 20 people to wear this for a couple of days and see what they think about it, because that's not representative. What you should do with a pilot is you take either a specific building or a department and ask all of the people to use the solution as if you've already adopted the solution. So they wear the badge holder every single day. They're being activated by a gateway that is part of the pilot program as they enter the building. They interact with people. At the end of the day, they go back home. The events are being uploaded into the portal. And after 1 month, you have really the full experience. You will have the feedback from the employees. How did they sort of feel about the solution? How did that influence their behavior? And you will have the data and be able to validate the value of that with your HR department, with the HSE department, and so on. Second thing I want to briefly touch on from a deployment perspective is how is the solution really being used from a day-to-day perspective. And if you look, and it may seem like a detail, but it's very important in terms of a deployment of social distancing and contact tracing solution, is how are you going to link the identity of a person to the devices, in this case, the badge holders. In our solution, we have two options for you. The first option is the option whereby you say, I'm going to do the distancing monitoring, contact tracing based on the badge, the access card of the user. So in this case, we take the access card that you use to get into the building every morning, that you use to badge to open your doors, and we're going to track the sort of social distancing contact tracing based on that badge. That means that it does not matter in this first model which badge holder a user has. They can pick up any badge holder, put their card inside, and they're good to go. They can switch to a different badge holder as many times as they want. It doesn't matter, because we're following them based on the card. The second model is a model whereby we say, no, we're not going to do that by card. In the second model, we're going to hand a device, a badge holder, out to every individual, and it's going to become their personal device. So every person is in charge of their own device. They're also responsible to recharge it. In that model, we're going to track the social distancing contact tracing based on the serial number of that device. So on the back of each badge holder, there's a little sticker with a serial number along with a QR code that represents that serial number, and then all of the reporting can be done based on that. It's interesting to see from our perspective that in the customer base, we have about a 50-50 mix between both models. So about half of the clients use their access card as the basis to represent the person. The other half uses the model whereby every individual has a badge holder that has been assigned to them, and they follow everything based on that badge holder ID. Next thing, very briefly, all of the deployments at this point are cloud-based and standalone. What does that mean? The backend platform, the database, all of the processing, the dashboard is run out of a data center, a cloud that RightCrowd operates. RightCrowd uses Google data centers across the globe for this service. So in this deployment model, it's RightCrowd's responsibility to manage and monitor the solution end-to-end. All of the deployments, and that to us was a bit of a surprise, but all of the deployments at this point are standalone. What does that mean? Our solution is able to integrate with other systems. We can integrate with an identity system, we can integrate with physical access control systems and the like. But at this point, clients typically prefer to use this as a standalone system, isolated from everything else. Probably the main reason for that is privacy, data protection. The fact that it's not connected makes it easy from a cybersecurity perspective to demonstrate that there's no linkages to anything else. And it also has the advantage from a data privacy perspective that in our system, if you're just using either the cards or the badge holder identification numbers and potentially add something like a reference ID, like an employee number, you're never storing any identity information in the system itself. So that also means when you keep that standalone, that the resolvement will always happen away from our system, avoiding any such GDPR or privacy issues. And then for reporting purposes, what we see is that most clients use the employee identifier as the means by which they do the reporting. In our solution, you have choices. You can say, I want to see the reporting based on the card number of every individual. You can do that based on the badge holder serial number, or you can do that based on an employee identifier, which you map to either the device or the card, depending on which model you chose. So that's from a deployment perspective. If we look at what we've learned from a lot of those deployments, first of all, it is super important to be clear on what the goals are that you're trying to achieve. We have social distancing enforcement as an important one. We have contact tracing as an important one. Some clients want both. It's important to define that upfront, because that will drive some of the evaluation criteria that you're going to use to evaluate the solution before you decide on a global rollout of it. And then the second very important one is clearly communicate those goals when you roll out the solution. And in our experience, a top-down communication is required. Why is that? You're introducing a new device that to the end user is a bit of an unknown. They're asking, what is this? Why is this used? Why are we doing this? So it's very important that there's a clear communication coming from the top of the organization saying, this is why we do this. This is all about safety. It's making sure that we keep the spread of the virus sort of as much as we can out of the organization. And if someone gets infected, that we can notify people that have been sort of in contact with that person. So communicating those goals is very important. Then another interesting one is just looking at the teams that are being involved in deployments. And it's a quite sort of broad mix of teams that are in most cases involved in projects related to social distancing, contact tracing. HR very often is the primary interface. We have departments like data privacy and data protection. IT and network teams get involved, has to do with the deployment of the gateways, making sure that those gateways have connectivity, are being powered and the like. Cybersecurity gets into the mix, reviewing where is data stored, which data is being stored, very often along with their colleagues from that data privacy, data protection. And then the physical security team gets involved if we go with the model whereby we use the badges, the access cards for the building as the means to identify people. Couple of other things from a lessons learned perspective. The better prepared, the faster things go. And we listed a couple of things that you can do or prepare for in advance, and that will make it much quicker in terms of rollout. First one, think about where do you want to put the gateways, and RightCrowd will give you guidance on this one. So we will tell you where to put it. We will help you with sort of determining what is the ideal location in, for example, an entrance area, but determine that, look at that before the gear arrives. Prepare the network connectivity for the gateways. Those gateways need to be able to talk to our cloud. So think about this in advance. Am I going to put the gateways onto a guest network with plain internet access? Do I put them onto a VLAN and then provide connectivity from the VLAN to the cloud? Do you want to put them onto the corporate network directly and then have firewall rules that allow the gateway to talk to our cloud? Think about that in advance. Prepare that end user communication, explaining what is this, why are we using this, but also what is expected from the end user. We have a template letter for that, which we share with our clients, and then they just modify it and then distribute that, share that with their end users. Determine who will need access to the reporting interface that I demonstrated to you, and then determine and know in advance what are you going to do in certain scenarios. What do you do in case of an infected person? What do you do if you see that certain people like repeatedly have very long and repetitive close contact? So think about those actions. And then last but not least, I want to talk a little bit about the typical timelines that are involved in rolling this out. When we're talking about a pilot, preparing for the pilot is fairly straightforward. Between a customer saying, yes, I want to do a pilot, and starting the pilot, we have about 1 week. So placing the order, doing all of the preparation, shipping, and then having the gear in place. And then pilots themselves take between 2 weeks and 1 month. We do think that you need a minimum of 2 weeks because you do want that user feedback. You want them to first get adjusted, sort of used to the technology and the use, and then you want a couple of days where they're already so used to it, and then also get the feedback once they've reached that stage. And then from a rollout perspective, if you're not doing a pilot, if you go straight into a deployment, we see that you typically need 1 month to prepare for this. Has to do with the different teams involved, has to do with the preparation. But if you first do a pilot, then the switch from pilot to full rollout is very, very easy because you literally have everything in place. So you just typically add more gateways, more badge holders, but you already have everything operational So that one is very straightforward. Last thing I want to do in terms of the feedback is just share a couple of quotes from some of our customers. First one in financial services. That one is an interesting one, and keep in mind what I just said about the pilots. The first couple of days, this person literally said like they were running like crazy when the badge holders went red, like, ooh, we need to sort of reestablish secure distance. But you see, and it typically happens after 1 to 2 weeks, they start to get used to it, get settled in. And then for people, this becomes a standard safety measure. They know they can trust the device, they have it. It becomes literally part, as this individual said, it becomes part of the office culture. It's the new normal. People just wear this every single day, and they know it has a very useful tool, and it helps them in keeping social distancing. Second quote I thought was pretty interesting, saying how quickly people adopted to the solution. And then the third one I want to call out is a client in the mining industry who highlighted that it really drives a better behavior. So it really, that visual, that first sort of goal that I explained earlier on, is super important and apparently very effective. And then to this client, it's what is most important is these longer duration contacts. So this customer was one of the customers for whom we sort of added the functionality to be able to filter on a minimum duration in the close contacts, and they focus on all of the long ones, which in their case is at least 10 minutes or more. So that was a quick overview or a recap of the solution, a view into the new reporting capabilities, and then some lessons learned from the different projects we've been involved with. The last thing I want to do, 5 more minutes, is give you a quick sort of overview of the different other things you can do with those badge holders, because we believe if you make an investment in this type of technology, you better make an investment in technology that can be used also for other things. And once COVID, hopefully at some point, will be conquered, that you can still use this technology for other sort of useful use cases. A quick recap of other things that you can do with these same badge holders with this same solution. First one, what we call secure areas. Going back to our example, we had people arriving in the building and they started showing the green light, showing everything is fine. Now imagine this person walking up to an area that is more secure for your organization. As an example, an R&D department. Let's say that you have an R&D department, you have people that arrive there, badged to get into the R&D, and what would happen in that case, as part of the secure area solution, what would happen is that if that person is actually allowed to go into the R&D department, then at that point, the badge holder would switch from the green light to another color. And that color is either one that you set yourself. You can, as an example, say anyone allowed into the R&D lab will show a dark blue color. And that literally means when we're inside of the lab and we look around, everyone will show a dark blue color. Or you can even set it, our software, to pick the color itself, like it's the software that's going to pick a random color. And on top of that, that color is going to change over time. So we're in the lab, everyone around us shows dark blue. And then in 1 hour from now, at the exact same time, all of them will switch to a next color that is completely unpredictable. For example, they all switch to pink. And 1 hour later, they're all going to switch to yellow. So that's the secure areas use case, addresses known problems with access control, like tailgating, people sort of just following someone else in a department, and in departments where it is important for you to make sure that only authorized people can go. This can be a very effective solution. Visitor management is a next one. Visitor management, with this sort of use case of our technology, what we will do is help you enforce a host escort policy. Many organizations have this. People's organizations say, we do not want a visitor to just walk around on their own at our premises. With this solution, what we do is, it's almost the exact opposite of social distancing. We want the visitor to remain with the host, not too close given COVID, but also not too far away from the host. If a visitor would leave the group, go too far away from the host, the visitor will first get that yellow warning, exact same thing. Then if they stay too far away from the host, the red alarm state. And in this visitor management use case, the host will also get a notification on their smartphone. and a security alert is being generated that can be used to, as an example, have a security guard go and look for the visitor. Open offices, another very interesting use case. Think of a different way of doing access control in office environments. Imagine that you have a high-rise. You arrive at the ground floor and you have your normal security controls. You have a reception desk, you have cameras, you have the receptionist or a security guard, you have turnstiles. So all of the normal things to validate the identity of the person, knowing whether there's a good reason for that person to be in your building. But then imagine you take the elevator, you go up to the 7th floor, you step out of the 7th floor, and there's no walls. There's no investment needed in walls, in door readers, in badge readers. You don't need to badge to get into that floor. You simply step out of the elevator. What happens at that point is that a gateway installed at the elevator bank will pick you up, will check with your physical access control system. Are you allowed onto the 7th floor? Yes or no? If you're allowed, you get whatever the right color sequence is or color code for that floor. If you're not supposed to be on the 7th floor, you don't have the authorization, then your badge holder goes blinking red, indicating you're not supposed to be here. Two additional use cases that we're working at RightCrowd. One is evacuation management. Use the same badge holders also for evacuation purposes. And I'll give you an example whereby you're using mustering points somewhere outside in case of an evacuation. What you can do with the solution is the following. In advance, you define in our system a couple, one or more evacuation zones. Let's say that an evacuation is being triggered. People in charge of the evacuation, typically people from health and safety, they have on their smartphone a simple app that allows them to activate that evacuation zone. And what will happen at that point is the following. As people arrive at the mustering point, their badge holders will be automatically checked into the evacuation zone. Their badge holder will switch to whatever color that you preset for that. For example, they will all become purple. So at that point, you both have a visual check. You can look around. Everyone should be purple. You know, all of those people have been accounted for. And from a reporting perspective, you will know all of the people that arrived at the mustering point. You will also know who are all of the people that have not arrived yet, but that did check into the building that day, that have been activated into the building. And for those people, you will also know where have they last been seen. So which gateway in the building last saw this person and when. So pretty interesting sort of use case in the context of evacuation management. And the last one I want to clearly, shortly sort of address is logical access control. The fact that if you are using the access badges that you use to get into the building, those access badges have been assigned by your organization. It's sort of a representation of an identity that you as an organization control. What you can do by means of our badge holders is use that same, call it identity card that you issued as an organization, to also use that as a second factor for logical access control. Imagine you sitting in front of your computer with your card inserted into your badge holder. That is used as an additional factor to validate that it's you. And imagine that at some point you go to the bathroom, you walk away from your computer. As soon as you're away a certain distance from your computer will automatically lock because you're no longer in close proximity of it. Very simple measure, but very effective in helping to protect intellectual property. More information on those use cases will follow in the next couple of weeks, and that information will also be available at the RightCrowd website. Last thing before we close, we very often get the question like, this social distancing and contact tracing solution, we want to test it out. How can I do that? There's really two ways. One way is buying one of our starter kits, and you can see the two options on the slide here. These starter kits include all of the equipment you need, badge holders, gateways, sample badges, but it also comes with the services needed to really get going. So this price is not just the price for the equipment, it's not just the price for the software, but it also includes the services to help you deploy it and then train you so that you have a good like end-to-end understanding of the solution. So starter kits are one way of doing that. The other method, as I explained, are pilots. So If you're serious about potentially deploying this technology, our recommendation would be to run a pilot, as I explained. If you want to do so, please do not hesitate to reach out to us. You can reach us at our website, rightcrowd.com. You can go to our social distancing section, use the inquiry form to get in touch with us, or you can reach out to me directly. My email address is bart.vansevenant@rightcrowd.com. You can see it on this slide because it's hard to pronounce, let alone spell. So you can copy it from this slide. And with that said, I hope that you learned something about both our solution, but also some of the lessons learned from other organizations deploying social distancing and contact tracing solutions within their organization. And if this triggers some interest from your end, please don't hesitate to reach out at us. And I hope to be in touch with you very soon. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.